Hey, welcome to the 162nd episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by Blake Robin and Amanda O'Connor. I'm Matt Enlow.
And I'm Warren Kaplan, and today we have filmmaker Zara Hayes on the show. She is an accomplished documentary filmmaker. Out of the UK, she's had documentary work on Netflix with BBC. She's been doing it forever. She did a documentary on people in Bangladesh and Rwanda and all over. You think of a documentary that you would make.
Hard-hitting documentary.
And Zara's done it.
In a surprise twist, she's directed the new comedy Poms about a bunch of women of a certain age who decide to band together and form a cheerleading squad in their retirement home.
Yeah, and it's Poms, P-O-M-S, as in Poms, pom-poms. But it's inspired by real events. This is a real thing. There are a lot of retiree cheerleading teams, and Zara has constructed a movie around this. Yeah, her cast is like insane, and she tells us how she got them. Diane Keaton, Rhea Perlman, Pam Grier.
It's so long. It's incredible.
Zara also has an awesome DP for her movie. Tim Orr shot it. He shot Eastbound and Down, Sex Drive, Pineapple Express, Choke, Year of the Dog, Z for Zachariah. Oh my goodness. She's got a really awesome team behind this movie, and she tells us all about it. But we really dive into everything, like how you get actors attached, how as a first-time director you get respected by your cast and crew.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because we talk all the time about how your life experiences inform your craft and process as a filmmaker, and I think it's especially interesting when your background is literally filmmaking, but in a slightly different way, in this case documentary, and how you apply it to a traditional narrative. And it's similar in more ways than you'd realize, and also unique in ways that are hard to predict.
Well, yeah, so it's a really fun talk, and it's really cool. Check out Poms Movie. # Poms Movie was the recommended way to find out about it. It's in theaters Friday, May 10th, and it's an amazing movie for Mother's Day.
Yeah, go take your mom to see it.
It's funny, and it's emotional, and it's crazy, and the ending will shock you. Potentially.
We'll see.
Anyway, before we get into the episode, we want to talk about one quick thing, and that is our Patreon. If you check out patreon.com/justshootitpod, you can learn all about how you can support us. And we have just started a new incentive to make supporting us even more rewarding.
Yeah, so now at the $10 level, you get your very own Just Shoot It hat. It's that simple. We mail you a cool baseball cap you can wear on set. It says Just Shoot It, a podcast, which we think is pretty funny. It's in like the Nike logo font, like just do it, just shoot it. It's a little clever, a little fun. But it is a thing that we're super excited about. We worked super hard on getting them out to people, and so $10 a month, you can go ahead and get yourself a Just Shoot It hat.
If you wear it on set and point at it, people will start shooting things.
I bet that these caps will make you come in an hour under budget all the time. You'll just shoot so much faster. People just don't realize, we should be rolling.
The Patreon investment you'll more than make up for in time saved on set by people feeling pressured to just shoot things. Yeah, the actor's not here, forget it. Who cares? Just shoot it.
Action.
Well, thanks a lot, everyone. Check it out. Patreon.com/justshootitpod and help us out if you can. And one final thing before we get into talking to Zara. This is May. You guys know what that means.
That's right. We've been teasing it out. Our friends have been teasing it out as well. We are in a competition to get the most iTunes reviews. It's the first to 25 is the first benchmark. But we are in a race between Light the Fuse, Making Movies is Hard, and Respect the Process. All great podcasts, but we are in a competition to get 25 new iTunes reviews as fast as possible. So you've got to help us out. I know you've been thinking about giving us an iTunes review. Now is the time to help out, because if we lose this gentleman's bet, it will not only be humiliating, but also we'll have to read their ad copy on our show.
If I was a listener and I had like a friend that listened to the show, I would try to get 24 reviews for our podcast and another podcast, and then at the exact same second, I would leave the 25th review with my friend. Just a bonus.
I do have multiple friends who like to be the person who puts the Kickstarter over their goal.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, dude, that is so uncool. Like, just go for it, man. Just submit the money.
Well, I think we've given you enough tasks. Leave us an iTunes review. Go to our Patreon. Get a hat. Wear a hat. Tell your friends about Just Shoot It. Just kidding. Yeah. Don't do any of that. Just drive around and listen to this podcast and think about doing one of these things later, but you never will.
Let Zara's incredible insight and experience and thoughtfulness just seep into your brain and make you a better filmmaker.
And here we go. We're recording with Zara Hayes.
Hi.
Zara, welcome. You've got a new film called Poms. Do you want to give us just a quick, little summary of your film?
So Poms is a film about a woman played by Diane Keaton who at the beginning of the movie decides to move herself from the city into a retirement community in Georgia and ends up setting up a cheerleading team for older women. So she goes in there with the intention of kind of leaving everything behind and giving up, and she ends up doing the biggest thing she's ever done in her life and the kind of craziest thing, aided by her next door neighbor played by Jackie Weaver, who refuses to let her kind of retreat into her shell and kind of makes her take part in things at the community. And the two of them together end up setting up the first sort of senior cheerleading team.
And this is based on a true story as well, right?
So
or no?
No, the story isn't true, but the fact that this happens is true. So what happened was I came across the fact that across America there are a number of cheerleading groups.
Inspired by true events.
True events, yeah, inspired by, yeah, totally. And there are just a number of these teams, and I kind of find it completely fascinating.
Yeah.
So.
And who else is in the film? It's a ton of recognizable faces.
Oh God, I mean, we're so lucky. We've got Diane Keaton, Jackie Weaver as the two leads, and then we have Pam Grier, Rhea Poms, Celia Weston, Phyllis Somerville.
And there's one other name I'm trying to remember.
Alicia Bowe, who plays the young. There's a young storyline.
Oh, great!
And that's kind of really led by Alicia Bowe, who's kind of a wonderful up and coming actress, and Charlie Tahan, who you might know from Ozark.
Well, that's so exciting. And I think also we were talking off the mic. You have a background in documentary filmmaking. Right?
I do.
So you kind of started in that world and then transitioned into narrative.
Is this your first narrative?
This is my first narrative, yeah. This is it.
Have you done short narrative stuff before?
No.
Oh, really?
No, this is
That's
it.
crazy. And you directed, I read, like The Battle of the Sexes, the documentary the movie is based on. Mm-hmm. And so were you involved in the Emma Stone movie?
We weren't involved in it, basically, but so obviously that's the story. That's Billie Jean King's story, and Danny Boyle, another Brit, came to our premiere in London and kind of loved the film and was talking to Billie Jean King about making a movie out of it, and they sort of took it from there. We weren't involved in a kind of story consultant sort of way, but it was, that was how it all came about. I mean, it's such a story that lends itself to being told as a movie because 3 acts and it's a sports story and it's kind of got everything.
Wait, can I jump straight into the juicy stuff? Were you not annoyed that they used the exact same title that you used for your documentary?
To be perfectly honest, yes, we were. But my take on it, ultimately Billie Jean King it's her life story, right? Right? We did things like I spent 2 weeks at the tennis museum in La Jolla going through archives.
La Jolla?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Going through, literally 2 weeks in a dusty room, going through old clippings of newspaper reports. And
it's very Kubrick of you.
And speaking to Bobby Riggs, who was obviously the antagonist, the guy, his son and the guy who'd been his coach, and really mining them and researching that in a way that had never been done before. So we did a lot of original research, including uncovering film that had never been seen before of the match that he had with Margaret Court and stuff. So we were definitely
dug deep.
Yeah, it was deep diving into that story.
Yeah, I wonder which one you should watch first.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because I feel like a lot of times you want to see the documentary after, right? Because you're I wonder which parts of that were true or not
that's true.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Maybe that would be the better way to do it. And it's so hard for me to say, but I definitely feel like they leaned more into as you would do, it creating a drama, like things that didn't exist on film, but about her relationship. The fact that she was kind of at the time like having a relationship with a woman behind her husband's back, and that became like the big storyline. But for us, we mentioned that, but we like absolutely always knew that our focus was that she was going to be a sporting heroine. That was the kind of like, it was a sports movie.
Right.
And that's kind of the way and everything was about getting that trophy at the end.
Well, it's funny because like as a documentary, you are like looking at kind of regular narrative movie tropes to like guide the structure of your documentary. But as a regular movie, you're trying to break those tropes, right?
Absolutely.
Which is really interesting.
Well, I find that completely fascinating. And actually, there's something with Poms that this crossover between what's true, what feels true, what has a ring of emotional truth but actually isn't true, and what is true but feels untrue, fascinates me. And Poms is not based on a true story, but there is one anecdote in there that comes from truth, which is when I went to meet some of these senior cheerleaders and talk to them, there was a woman who I met who was on a team where a woman had been banned from joining the team by her husband, and the husband has said, "You'll join that team over my dead body," and that he then died. And it was a running joke with them all that
he
she'd
was poisoned.
Yeah, that she'd bumped him off, as we'd say in England. And I found that it's so ridiculously funny, but also the interesting thing is they made it into all the trailers for Poms and everything. And it's become one of those kind of, it's become the joke that everybody loves. But a couple of people have said to me, that feels, is that too far? Like that feels a bit unreal. And that's the one thing in the script that's the truth. And it's just so interesting to me that maybe it has sometimes, things that actually did happen feel so incredible that they can't feel real.
I'm curious, because you mentioned you kind of researching Poms a little bit. Do you feel like your background as a documentarian informed the way that you approached research in general?
I think so. I mean, it's so hard for me to imagine not approaching things through the lens of talking to people.
Yeah, interesting.
Because that's just what I do, and that's what I've done, and that's how I learn everything, and that's how I've operated. And I feel like every story that I've been interested in and writing and thinking about quote unquote fictional stories for a long time, but it's like I can't disassociate how you the process from real life and how you like abstract from talking to people. And everyone I ever talk to or meet is I find something in that I kind of take, or that sounds kind of horrible. I don't mean it like that, but,
but you
but
internalize.
I
Steal
internalize.
souls.
I steal people's stories and store them for the future. No, I feel like if I ever want to know, I can't personally, but I know this totally works for people. Because I know many writers who completely work in a locked off kind of box, and it's all through imagination. But for me, a conversation with a real human being who has some idiosyncratic life experiences, as we all do, it is just so inspiring and enlightening, and that's kind of how I get, that's how I get excited.
On a practical level, how do you approach it? Do you have like a schedule? Are you regimented in terms of like, oh, I'm working on this movie, I'm gonna tour the countryside and go to all these different homes and things like that, or no?
No, not at all. No, partly through practicalities, but my background, I worked my way up in sort of the TV world really in the UK, and you can get, I got paid to be a development researcher to find stories and to pitch them to broadcasters and networks for documentaries. So I guess that was my training ground in sort of the art of the email spam, or the figuring out someone's email address, which I still to this day, I kind of,
Is it first name last name @gmail.com?
Or is it the hyphen? Is it the first initial dot? And in fact, someone emailed me today with a script and was like, oh, I'm going to send this to your agent, but I hope you don't mind my kind of chutzpah for kind of sending it to you directly. And I was like, yes, I wrote immediately back to him. I was like,
I hate your script, but good job.
I just kind of like respect the kind of, because that's what I do to people. Like I literally just email them out of the blue, or I get their phone number and call them. And that's kind of how I've ever done it. And then in terms of the process, it really depends on how much time, how much availability, what else I'm doing. If I can put I definitely will get on a plane, or like, I'll if I think it's helpful and I've got the cash, I'll jump on a plane and kind of go and meet them, because there's nothing better than that. And so that sort of sense, waiting around for people's permission to do that kind of thing, and it is kind of frustrating to me, because I feel like that's the only way things happen.
Yeah. Sometimes we say that that's what this podcast is about.
Just doing it, right?
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. No, absolutely.
Well, I have a million questions for you, but I just read this book about this guy that tried to interview all these various people, and he talks a lot about like what his cold email is, like how to send an email that will get responses.
Oh, I love this.
And I'm curious to know what yours is, because if you're guessing emails and you're emailing like Margaret Thatcher's son or something, I don't know if she has a son.
Okay, here's the classic
one.
one.
What do you write?
There are so many techniques, but one of my favorite ones is that in the subject line you do like something, because if you just say,
but isn't that like classic spam? Your missed shipment.
But if it's a name that looks like people would generally,
hey Zara,
documentary or film proposal or whatever.
Oh, sure.
I think it kind of that has worked for me for sure. It depends who you're writing to.
That is
obviously
a good move, though.
No, it's good.
Because the subject line is the most important, right?
Okay, and then do you write dear
first
Hugh
name.
Grant, or do you
Dear
say
Hugh? Dear
just Dear Hugh?
I would, I wouldn't say Mr. Grant or anything like that.
But DEAR, right? You're not like, hey Hugh, or
no.
What's up?
Because I think being I think the line between like, hey, I'm being quite cheeky here, but also listen to me. That's a kind of fine line to tread, isn't it? And you definitely keep it short and sweet. My thing is always, in fact, I did it last week to someone. I watched a documentary, and there was a character in the documentary who I just thought was an extraordinary young woman who would make a great movie. She was one of 8 stories in the documentary, but it was a standout story to me. So I figured out her email. I figured out where she's studying now, because it was
not creepy. Yeah, go on.
It is sounding like I'm stalking people now that I'm talking about it.
You're going for it though, no.
And then I emailed her, and the email is very kind of polite but kind of clear. I'm a filmmaker. I saw this documentary. I think your story is incredible. I'd love to talk further. Can we hop on the phone? Because you have to say enough to intrigue them, but not so much that it's kind of like it sounds either stalkerish and weird.
But when you say I'm a filmmaker, do you make a hyperlink out of that and have it go to your IMDb page or something?
No, I don't.
Do you say
actually.
I have a movie that is coming out, or I just worked with Diane Keaton? You don't, because how do they know you're not just some film student?
I guess
or
people
does it not
Google
matter?
people. And I think also if someone's willing, what I kind of learned, not that I'm still very much learning, but the thing that I notice is that if someone's ready to tell their story, we're talking now about real people's actual stories. That's different from, hey, you've got a really interesting job. Can I talk to you for background research for something? But if we're talking with this girl who I emailed, I was thinking she could be the basis of a movie. And if someone's in a place in their life where they're apt to tell their story, they don't really, I don't think people are that discerning about
I love being in movies. That sounds fun. Yeah,
and then of course anyone who is discerning will Google you and find out that you actually have got an IMDb profile and you're not a complete, you're not just completely chancing it. But that's been my thing, is getting someone on the phone or speaking to them or seeing them is so much more effective than anything you can do over email, because you just get lost. And so my mission is always to try and speak to a human being.
And if you wanted to talk to Steven Spielberg or Hugh Grant or the CEO of some big eBay or something, would you do the same thing?
So yeah, pretty much, yeah. Although I might drop some some
Credit.
little, so I
Credits.
sprinkle some credits in there at that point, because, it depends what someone's going to be, swayed by, and if someone's got like layers of people to get through. But again,
Yeah.
I would always try and get that person's email address rather than people on their way to them, because I think that there are so many blockers, right?
Sure.
So that's what, I mean, it has like, I'm definitely not. I have friends who kind of have a background in investigative journalism, and those people are on another level in terms of like what they're prepared to do to kind of get to someone. But with me, it's just like if you make a direct human contact and you're sincere and you can show that your interest is sincere, I think it goes a long way.
Yeah.
Like I got another email this week, like. And the person was like, "Oh, I really like all your work," and was quoting like all the things that they'd supposedly watched of mine, and got like 3 of the titles wrong. And I was just like,
Was it
"You
Matt?"
clearly haven't then."
Yeah. I can't wait for. I love palm trees, so this movie is going to be perfect for
So
me.
it won the Palme d'Or. Palme d'Or.
It's just like, yeah. So I don't know. I just think I find that exciting though. I find speaking to people, it's always going to turn something up, and if someone's just kind of angry and doesn't want to talk to anyone, they're not going to be swayed. And the thing is, obviously, you could then there's a different type of approach, which is, hey, I'm working with like X film company and we've got a load of money to throw at you. Coming from a documentary background, that's not really my...
Right, but you might say I'm working for BBC or something, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Or I have worked with the BBC and I'm thinking this could be interesting for them. But in terms of like trying to sort of offer people, I think anyone who's motivated initially in the money is
Right.
suspicious.
Not a good person.
Right? It's suspicious.
Well, do you think you need to present something to them? Like, this is what you're going to get this out of it. Do you want to be a part of this thing? Or do you present it more as like, hey, I need this thing from you?
Oh my God, that's interesting. Because I think when you're telling someone's story, again, especially in documentary, but even with stuff that's kind of loosely based on, you have to be, I think, and this again comes from my background of, in the UK, you don't pay people to be in documentaries. Over here, there's a huge culture of paying people.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you know about that, Matt?
I know that there was like a big controversy with the 2 Fire Festival documentaries.
Yes.
Right? Like that.
Absolutely.
One of the main guys got paid like
The
a ton
Jerry
of
guy?
money. Yeah, no,
And so-
not the Jerry guys. The guy who was actually the founder.
The guy that organized the festival.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think documentary, there's a real value to like giving a platform for testimony, and it doesn't always have to be, you don't always have to have the counter argument, because in this world, there are journalistic films have to kind of have that on the one hand, on the other hand, but I think there's where documentary really shines is like giving personal testimony, kind of elevating that to kind of film,
Yeah.
to cinema, and I think that's what it does. But it's as a result, it's like really disturbing. But that those people were not paid a cent for being part of that process, and it was a UK director, and I heard an interview with him where he talked about that, and I kind of thought there is something about the culture or the background in having grown up in that world of kind of the UK documentary scene, where it is such a taboo to even think about paying a contributor. And then you think, well, actually someone's giving you the most, like they're giving you, on the other hand, it's all people have is their story, and they should be, compensated for that. But it muddies things, and all of this to say that I think if someone's from the outset, their interest has to be in trusting you to tell that story. And so it's not like, hey, I need this. Like it's a transaction. I think both people get something out of being in a film and making a film. Clearly the person making the film gets something out of it. And I always ask myself that, especially with documentaries. It's like, why am I doing this, and what does the other person get out of it? Like, what is it giving to them, and is it worth it for them? Because it can be.
But do you think that like while they're admitting they murdered someone on camera or whatever,
Yeah,
like,
I do actually. I made a documentary about a 15-year-old boy and a 12-year-old boy who shot and killed the stepfather of the 15-year-old, and I interviewed them both in prison. And that is the most. Well, what is the justification here? Like, what are you? what are you doing? Like,
and have you ever not? You're like, this is like amazing for the documentary, but bad for
the person.
Yeah.
I have actually, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I've kind of, or for other reasons, for kind of, the message overall that you kind of want to give. I would feel it's okay to edit something that goes against the overall message that you are trying to put across through the film, because the idea that documentary is this pure thing is
this pure journalism, right?
It's storytelling.
Absolutely. And so no, I feel very kind of, I've thought about that stuff a lot, and I think you have to, especially when you're putting three people, especially when the subject matter is darker, and I've made my fair share of darker things, which is why Poms is such a kind of, it looks like a bit of a kind of an anomaly or a left turn in my career, because it's, I've made documentaries about like the Rana Plaza tragedy in Bangladesh, which is like the second worst industrial disaster in the entire history of the world. And I interviewed survivors of that and the most horrific, horrendous experiences that people have had. And then now I'm making a cheerleading comedy.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Well, I do have like I think a good segue to the cheerleading comedy, which is, we heard about how you get various people to be in your documentaries, but what do you cold email, D Keaton at hotmail.com?
Do you know the truth? I mean, and this is where there's a lot of problems with our industry, and it's completely crazy and irrational, and luck is such a major part of it. And it's so hard to imagine like how you see a career path and all of that stuff. But this is an example where the system just has worked. Like, it's just happened. It's worked. Literally, it went through the agencies. It went through her agent. She read it. I mean, it's sort of...
Okay, what did you send the agent?
What do you send the agent? The script. I mean, I think I wrote actually, no.
So your agent sent her agent? Are you at the same agency?
We are now, but I wasn't at the time. I wasn't with WME then, because I didn't have US reps at that point. I was just in the UK. And this is what I'm saying. It's like, it's an extraordinary sort of... It seems, when I used to hear people say that kind of thing at Q&As, I'd be like, that doesn't really happen. That's bullshit. Like,
I'm going to keep
someone
figuring out
knew
people's
someone
emails.
who knew someone. And But genuinely, like, we had it financed before she was attached, so they could say this is a real offer.
Well, that's a big deal.
That's a huge thing, obviously, because people's biggest issue is wasting people like her time.
Right.
She clearly can't read everything that's being sent. And so there was a kind of like the company that we were working with had committed to financing the movie, and it was going to happen. And
and it wasn't contingent on
casting. No, this
IMDb
is the amazing
meter
thing.
This is incredible. Let's back up. Let's start a little bit
this
earlier.
Is why this film story is kind of like, I'm very aware of how it's the kind of it's extraordinary, and I don't know if this will ever happen to me again.
Sure. Well, the trick is
you only need it to happen the first time.
and like have an incredible career creating great documentaries that then get turned into feature films, right?
And then turn your own.
And then, whoop, it just fell into your lap after a decade of work.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not suggesting that, like, it's not like I didn't, like, it's been in every stage. It feels like a wading through treacle, you know. But there is aspects of the story of how it came to be that are just kind of, it's very smooth. Like, even the financing happened within a very short space of time. We had multiple offers of finance, and we chose who financed it.
Incredible. So how did that happen? So you've got the script, right?
And E1 financed it, right?
It was actually a company called Sierra Affinity who got bought by E1 recently. So now it's an E1 film. But it was they were a company who, they're a sales agent basically based in LA. And they have kind of like, they had an interesting place in the market in that they were doing the kind of $5 to $15 million films and finding a way to sell them through foreign sales and kind of like make the numbers make sense. In the way that A24 have very clearly taken a piece of the pie that it was not being like looked at by other people. I think they did something quite unique in that they were selling and movies. They had a long-standing business in selling movies internationally, so they knew what kind of the appetites were, and they were very honed in terms of the commercial, like the market for things. And then
they felt like there was a market for comedy.
Well, they started financing films, and the first film they were majorly involved in, from a financing point of view, was Atomic Blonde, and they did
That's
very well at
straight
that.
up genre film, though, right?
Straight up, yeah, exactly. But then with Poms, this was the first film that they'd offered to fully, entirely finance, and they felt they knew on the basis of the concept and the script. But I would say even more than the script, honestly, the concept. This is me interpreting this. I am not a sales agent, and I've never been to a market.
But it makes intuitive sense.
Right? All right. No, it's financed out of AFM, right?
No. They financed it internationally.
Oh, it's sold at AFM.
And it's sold domestically at AFM.
I see.
Okay.
Once it had been made. So they basically said, these people are experts in knowing what they can and can't sell at a market.
And it was the biggest sale at AFM. Right?
It was, yeah. And they basically go, okay, this concept, if we can get if we can get good people in it, which I'm sure we can because the script is good.
Which is crazy because you got it financed before
Diane Keaton. Absolutely.
Anyone else in the cast?
No.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure it was based on you too, right?
Well, I'd love to think so.
I mean, they wouldn't. You don't just finance a film without believing in the director.
They believed in me. I know it's.
Was there ever talk of a different director?
I couldn't. No, because I wouldn't. This is the thing that I did that was smart. Like it wouldn't have. It couldn't happen without me.
And did you write it?
I co-wrote it. So I had it was my idea. I had this story, and then I found a screenwriter who I work with because I hadn't written a produced script obviously before, but they couldn't have the idea if I weren't doing it. So no, I think they'd seen my previous work and they believed in me, and they thought they could finance it at a level where the risk was they were comfortable with the risk. Like they from the basis of the knowing the market and knowing that this kind of clearly they thought the script was good enough, and they knew that they could sell the idea with the right kind of package, and that they could finance it to make it make sense. And we started off from that point, and then it did slightly grow and it got bigger. And obviously, as we got, then we did get the kind of, you do your list, don't you? And then it's like, Diane Keaton is obviously number one, and then you get her. And that's when it kind of, wow.
Wait, so sorry, just for our listeners that have never done this before. First of all, AFM is the American film market, right?
Yes.
So that's a market. But before you finished the movie when you sold it. So.
Absolutely. So it had been financed. So what happens is, and again, caveat, I'm not in film finance, but I've seen it close enough now that I understand. I think basically what they do is they take the package.
And what do you mean by the package?
So the idea, the script, the director, any talent that are attached to it.
And there's no life rights or anything attached to this idea.
No, there's no life rights
because
fiction. It's total fiction, and it's inspired by a true story, but it's complete fiction. And they take it to Cannes, Berlin, the major markets where movies sell as ideas, and they say to distributors in certain countries, hey, Germany, would you be interested in 2 years' time in having a movie about a senior citizen cheerleading squad? Oh, yeah, that sounds interesting. What would you pay? They have a negotiation. They do a deal in principle of like, if you make that film, this is what I'll buy it for. And they cobble together through. And
do they bring a poster of the movie, or
they did something
a list of
really
your
cool.
credits or something?
Yeah, they did. They absolutely did. They do something actually amazingly cool. They make these little videos of like the director talking about it, and if there's any talent, they do. So they did Aaron Sorkin's directorial debut, and they had like Jessica Chastain talking about why she wanted to do the film.
Sure.
Yeah.
And if you show anyone that, right, it's like
how much you want to pay?
No, but it's like, imagine, I'd be, if I were a kind of distributor in Iceland, and I saw it's real. These were a real company. They've done it many times before.
Were they walking and talking? That's
right.
The tricky one. Sorry.
Well, I guess that you have this idea, and maybe this company is like, okay, we'll make this movie for $4 million, but if you get someone that's on this list of 50 actresses then we will make it for $7 million.
Absolutely.
Like that there is, but if it's these actors, then we'll make it for $5 million.
100%. The whole world of foreign sales is predicated on the numbers that actors bring to foreign sales. So that is the entire business. And the people who work in this are incredibly smart, strategic, and kind of, you can say a name of an actor to them and they'll say, we could give you that at, I could finance that for you at 5 million.
Right.
I could make that work.
Yeah, they're like poker players. Like they just have the stats in their heads. Yeah.
But what was special about your situation, which I know, Matt, you've gone through this, and I've had things set up where it's like, if we get one of these actors, the movie goes, and we don't get the actor and the movie doesn't go. But you had that no matter what your movie is going to go, now it can only get bigger and better.
Yes.
But we have a shoot date.
Clearly they would have in the contract had some sort of out for it, but it was a commitment to make the film. And that was very important to the producers, obviously, because you don't just want to anyone would say, great, if you get an A-list, then actor, then I'll finance it. But what was special about the offer was that they wanted to make the movie. Right. And they were like, we'll make this work. And they were confident that we could attract some people who, I think everyone's been amazed at who we didn't end up attracting, frankly. But I think that they felt confident enough in the concept and the script and hopefully the director, that they felt like, okay, let's do this, let's make this. We'll expand or contract the budget depending on what happens, So from that point of view, I hadn't quite understood before or appreciated how much of the film business is driven by foreign sales. And then the domestic sale becomes a whole other thing, and what happens in America.
And it's an American movie, right?
Completely.
Okay, so let's go back to you contact her agent. You say, here's the script. The movie's greenlit already. We would love for her to consider it. And then does she say, okay, I want to meet the director?
Yeah, she says she wants to meet you. Clearly,
where'd you guys meet?
This amazingly, again, Diane is such an extraordinary, unique person. No, in a coffee shop in Santa Monica.
House.
Oh, that's good. Which coffee shop?
I can't remember the name of it, but it's like it's a hipster coffee shop.
Sure.
Don't worry, it's very cool. Yeah. But it was just like the best thing about it was that my experience with Diane is that she operates in a way that is completely in sync with mine, in that the first email I got was from her agent saying, do you mind if I pass on your email? Like, do you mind if Diane contacts you? She's got a few questions and thoughts.
Right. Cut out the middleman.
Absolutely.
It's such an agent move, right?
And I said, of course not. Like, I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. I don't mind if she... And then from that moment, it's like, I get the email. It's the most detailed, thoughtful 5 pages of like thoughts and notes. I'd like to meet and discuss these. If you think that this is something that you're interested in discussing, these are my issues with it. This is what I love about it. These are some, random musings I have about the subject matter. Can we meet? And that's so cool. Then and
we'll put that email on our website, justshootitpod.com.
But that's what was, and I think again I think that's pretty rare and unique in the way she operates, is just completely direct. And, she's very much like her own stylist, her own curator, she does her own stuff. And she's been from that moment just a kind of creative partner, like in a completely non-bullshit way. I'm saying that, like, she has been a force in the project. She's like... And when I met her, she was absolutely not committed to doing it. She wanted to watch all my documentaries. She watched them all. She gave me feedback on them all.
Are you serious? Wait, how many?
I sent her links.
You made like...
Oh, she watched them all.
Over a dozen, right?
Oh, yeah, she watched like the 15-minute piece that I made for the Guardian newspaper about the... I mean, she really does her homework. And she gave me, like, brutally honest thoughts and feedback on all of them.
She's like, the lighting will be better on me, right? Than this Bangladesh lady.
She honestly is this, so she kind of was not going to sign up to something where she didn't. That's not who she is. She wasn't just going to be like, yeah, I love the idea and I love the script, I'll do it. She wanted to know who she was getting into business with. And And then so after that meeting, which was a slightly surreal coffee shop experience with Diane Keaton, she then, I kind of knew after that meeting that she would, well, I hoped. But
you have a sense, though.
You have a sense
Yeah.
because she was so invested. I don't think you spend so much time at her level of where she's at in her career thinking about a script and investigating the people involved in it if you're not kind of into the idea.
Wait, can I ask one more question, which you don't have to answer? But when you send it to her agent, you know that if Diane says yes to the movie, it's the
happening.
budget is a different level. So when you send her the script, do you also send an offer that takes into account this bigger budget?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm pretty sure they didn't send in an offer with the first, because that went through the casting director. The sort of the initial approach kind of came through the official channels, but I don't think there's an assumption that if you're at that level, there'll be a conversation that will be grown up about it. I think it's like who's talking to who, right? In terms of, this was a reputable company with a brilliant casting director sending a bona fide kind of
Movie
offer,
star.
to a real actual movie. Like, these are people who've all worked with each other. They all know each other. I'm the kind of random wild card in the process, but I'm not saying, hey, come, this is what I'll pay you to be in my movie or whatever. It's sort of like there's an understanding that this business kind of, there are levels, and that's like a problem for later if she wants to do it. Clearly no one's going to try and lowball. It's sort of,
well, but there's a difference. It's not, I think if you're making a movie for like $2 million or something, then
right,
and you offer her $200,000, right? Like 10% of the budget. That's not an offensive offer, but for her, well, so I was attached to do this movie, and it starred this older character, and we were trying to get like a Tommy Lee Jones or Jeff Bridges or Jack Nicholson, someone like that to read it. And what we ran into is, like, when you are an Oscar winner, you're in your 70s or 80s or whatever, and someone is like, hey, will you come with me for a month to Michigan to shoot this film? Like, it's going to take, an insane script, an amazing director, or a lot of money to just say to this person. I mean, clearly Diane Keaton doesn't need the money to survive.
Absolutely. But I think that's where the idea comes into its own, because, all the roles for, and Diane is obviously one of the actors of her generation who is working often and clearly, is irregularly in movies. But I would say that something that she feels and is true, if you just look at the things that she's done, you're always someone's mother, you're someone's grandmother. The movie isn't really about you, like, it's about some people in their 40s, and you are the kind of, and that's fine and valid, but that's valid. Or there's the other trope, which is the kind of seniors finding love,
right,
which is a whole other,
or criminals robbing a bank. I feel like I see that
yes,
a lot.
That's a new one that I'm okay
that's
with.
the sort of
actually.
mischievous kind of like having fun. But I think that
star of the cheerleading team is rare.
So you can imagine, like, I don't know, and I'm completely fantasizing here, but you can imagine that, like, weekly call with your agent where it's like, what's come in, and you're just like, oh, yawn, like
another fabulous kitchen for me to stand in.
Absolutely, right? Oh, great. So that's another vehicle for that A-list 40-odd-year-old actress, and I'm I get to be her mother, or and then it's like, what? Hang on, what? Something about I would set up a cheerleading team. Diane's never really danced before that much. It's not her thing, and again, it's just like sometimes something chimes with someone, and you've hit something, which is just like something about that appealed enough to her to go, I want to read that. Let's have a look. And then once you're actually with that person, all of those conversations about what you're offering, and then it's about, especially with someone who is so much their own, I think she is really an artist. Like, I don't say that about many people, but I do think she's still, despite all the things that she's achieved and all the she's been at the kind of coal face of commercial cinema, right? In a way, like for decades, but she kind of still has the ability to kind of put all that aside and just go, what is this? Look at it on its own terms, which I think is also probably, she's very rare in that sense, but I don't think everyone who's at that level of the game is like that either.
Yeah, no, there's definitely some actors that have been around for a while that are like phoning it in for the paycheck. They'll do, like, I'll do anything for $50,000 a day.
If you pay me, and frankly, when we were talking about casting, like in the initial conversations, those things are known, right? And people know who those people are.
I want to talk a little bit about actually your thought process. So you've got Diane Keaton in this, the rest of this entire awesome cast, and you've got a background in documentary. So you're stepping on, like, how do you prepare to
do that,
to direct performances? With an artist, with a force, with someone who knows their way around the set.
Right? If you're just like, I don't feel like that's real. Just be real, right?
Can you do that better, please?
Yeah. I want the truth, Diane.
But really, how did you prepare? Like, what did you think about, and what panned out well, and what maybe would
I change?
Yeah.
That's a very good question. So in terms of how I prepared, I feel like my big thing from the get-go was, there's no hiding here. There's no escaping the fact that I'm not going to bullshit my way through this and pretend that I've done this because I haven't. And as I said, from the first meeting, Diane wanted a list of links to all my films. And we had a very kind of clear conversation about that, in the sense of, this is we're going on a bit of a journey together. And I wanted to be really honest about where I was, because I didn't want to feel the extra pressure of kind of that. And so I feel like my approach to it was to be sincere and meet them, to appreciate who they were and what they were bringing in. Let's be real, I'm working with experts here. I'm getting to sort of work with people who've done this a few times.
And did that translate across your whole crew, like your cinematographer, your production designer, your stylist?
In terms of who I chose to...
Like, did they all come from narrative, or did you bring some people from your doc crew?
The main reason I couldn't bring people from my doc crew is because a lot of them were basically in England and we didn't have the budget. So that was the main reasoning for that wasn't to do with the narrative doc thing. It was the realities of having to employ people from Georgia because of the tax credit. But so I would have loved that, actually. But I definitely, the people who I chose, I tried to be sensitive to my own background, and I didn't want to disappear. Like, I know a couple of other people who've been documentary makers who've made the leap, as it's known as, into narrative. And I don't think it's that huge of a leap, actually, personally, but in terms of the realities of what you're doing. But the one thing that I kind of got from people was that if you kind of like lose yourself, what you have is years of telling stories, like through a camera, and that's very valuable. And you have to kind of put systems in place where you can sort of lean into what you do have, and then where you don't have it, you kind of ask for help, or you're honest about it, and you kind of look for support from those around you. So I think the balance that you're talking about maybe is, how are you kind of honest about your inexperience in that sense, but also commanding, this ensemble cast of like A-list actors. And I honestly can't give you an answer to that, because I think it's people it's an instinctive thing, and I think you either have it in you to be able to coordinate, to be that person or not. It's about knowing what you want, right? Not that I didn't, prepare, and not that I did. I spent some time with a directing actors coach beforehand, and I did my homework in that sense, but I don't think anything can really prepare you for that moment when it's like, the floor is yours, and you've got kind of, in the first thing we filmed was one of the scenes with all the 8 women on the team. So you've got like 8 sets of eyes looking at you, and the crew all standing there going, what are we doing? Like, where can we do a marking rehearsal?
The crew is worse though, right? Because they're like kind of like just like
Well, they have
rough,
time to
like-
judge you from behind, you know, as opposed to
Yeah.
like in your face.
I think that the atmosphere that from meeting them with a kind of honesty from the get-go, but also being very clear that the story that I wanted to tell in terms of the sensibility overall, I kind of always wanted to be open, but at the same time, you know, to ideas and everything, and absolutely collaborative. But I definitely like had a strong sense of the kind of tone that I wanted to achieve with it. And I think that they responded to that. I mean, you'd have to ask them, I feel, because I no, genuinely, like, I don't know, but I think that there's a respect that's gained from like someone who's not trying to be something that they're not.
Yeah, if you're bullshitting, they
If
see
you're
through that,
bullshitting,
yeah.
I think that's the worst thing. I really do. And I think that there are all these myths about directors and the kind of cult of the kind of the director who saw the movie in their head and then it all played
My
out.
vision.
My
Yeah.
vision. I hate the word vision more than
Yeah.
anything. Actually, it's one of my biggest pet peeves. And
We've talked about that a lot because it's intimidating to the director more than anything.
and everyone, it feels like stifling. I just like, why would anyone want to be, you know, you're an actor who's had 50 years of experience of life and acting.
Right.
And then you're coming on board with someone who's telling you that they've already got it all figured out and they know exactly. It feels like the
seems
death
crazy.
of creativity to me. But
It's also on a practical level, the director is always going to have the least amount of time on a set.
yeah,
Always. You know what I mean? Like, there's just
so many factors.
There's so many factors, and it takes so long to make a movie that like any day player is just going to be around the block many times over.
Yeah, but I think that I think that that's where the
Unless you're a documentary filmmaker where you're
where
like
you've got time and
have
my
done thousands of days on set.
Well, here's the thing. So that was my thing was, how can I bring like sprinkles of like what it feels like to make a documentary to this crazy set?
Two
us
words. Handheld.
I did it. There's whole scenes in this movie that are handheld,
Oh,
which
good.
is extraordinary for what it is.
What comedies you can't do a
Can't
comedy
do
handheld.
handheld.
What is this, Modern
I
Family?
managed to kind of sneak it in.
Oh, good. What are the other
Were you
sprinkles?
operating?
No, I wasn't operating, no. But our DP was on some of it. And I chose the DP as someone who has done, he is, very, very, what they call a safe pair of hands, which I always think can be a compliment and also can seem a bit derogatory at the same time. But he is really seasoned. He's done everything. He shot most of David Gordon Green's films.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, cool.
But then he's also done like big studio comedies. Bit, really.
Well, David
big.
Gordon Green's done. He did Pineapple Express.
Tim shot Pineapple Express. He was perfect because to me he's just like very unique in that he has done docs. He still does docs occasionally. He'll do a $2 million film if he likes it, all handheld. But he'll also be employed to do kind of like these Christmas family movies where he'll be, and so he understands the kind of like, he understood the kind of what we needed to do to satisfy the powers that be enough. without freaking them out. Because if I'd come in and got like a gritty doc DP,
Sure.
there's just no way that would have flown.
I've actually never heard that term before. Have you? A safe pair of hands? I wonder if it's British or if I just have never heard of it.
Have you never heard that? Oh, that's.
But I like it.
keep
I
being
like that
told
term.
that all the time about everything. Everything I've ever done, every producer has always wanted to pair me up with a safe pair of hands.
wow.
Because there's a perception that
Were you
you're not
holding
a
knives
safe
at the
pair of
time?
hands. Yeah, it's like we need to get you a super experienced editor because they're the safe pair of hands.
What?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's a young female thing, but there is definitely
I
like
wonder if it's a British thing. I've never heard that saying. Have you? I hope
have
it's
a
not
hunch
that.
you're right, actually.
no.
Yeah,
Honestly,
I
like
think it's
everything
like-
that what I've realized
It's
is
like,
like
don't worry, we'll get someone to take care
completely.
of you.
We'll
Yeah.
get someone to look after you and take care of you.
Unless
It'll
it's
be
like
okay.
an old school thing.
No, it's like a kind of, you probably need some like looking after here, so we'll get you a safe pair of hands. And there's an kind of like this assumption that you can control someone through if you kind of make sure that they work with certain types of people, that
Right.
you can kind of control them. But I kind of feel like in order to that dance of like keeping those people happy and getting what you want is obviously the whole art form of being a director.
Yeah. It's getting the cast and the crew to like you at the same time.
Yeah,
And the producers.
Right, and meanwhile, kind of making sure that you're fighting the battles that are really important, and the ones that aren't, you're kind of making sure that you gracefully kind of let them go.
You just have to make sure to tell them, okay, you're going to win this one, but you're going to give me the next one.
Well, I think, though, again, it's like, I just think, you know, a good idea can come from anywhere. And if I'm sort of up for putting myself completely aside with all of that and just letting it flow. And going back to your question about what are the kind of, how do you, I mean, clearly we were on a ridiculous schedule. We didn't
how
have
many days
much.
did you shoot?
We had 29 days. We lost one day to lightning. That's a whole other story.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it was a night.
Those tax credits were worth it though, right?
Well, for someone they were. But they definitely...
Diane tax credits Keaton.
Oh my God. The Georgia thing is a whole... Georgia in summer is not a place to comfortably shoot a movie with lots of exteriors. But it was kind of like we were on a kind of relentless schedule of a lower budget film, but with people who kind of operate at a level that is much higher. So it felt like we had, and everyone always says this, and it always is the case, of course you feel like you don't have enough, but we were so up against it in the sense of getting through the work, and we didn't have kind of the normal contingencies that you might have in this sort of situation. So I'm not suggesting that kind of it was this free-for-all kind of thing. And obviously because of my background in documentary, there was a kind of, the eyes were on me to make sure that I could actually pull off, you know, getting the days in on time, and that I wasn't going off-piste and kind of being free with the material. But at the same time, like, I wanted some of that. And Diane, and this again is why she's such an important creative collaborator, because she loves being free with scripts and material and kind of doing things differently and trying things. And she doesn't like just like doing the same thing 3 times, you know. And so we found a way in which in certain scenes we could be a bit more experimental and kind of like
called 3 cameras.
It was 2. It definitely was 2. But no, we there are whole scenes in Poms where like half of the stuff was in the moment.
Yeah.
Which again, for
comedy, it's fine, right? You know.
For that, but for that kind of film, right, is quite unusual as well. And that was obviously the producer's biggest fear, is that I would make, that I was trying to kind of make. They kept saying, in a very derogatory way, that this isn't, you know, it's not some indie New York film.
Yeah, and don't travel well.
That's seen as kind of, that was seen as the kind of anathema of what we were doing.
You're like, have you seen Manhattan?
Yeah, right.
But I kind of, I completely appreciate what they're saying in the sense of like, we were trying to get a real balance, and now it's being distributed very widely because it feels like, you know, a certain type of film, and I'm very grateful for that. But I also wanted to make sure that where I could, like, got in, you know, the things that I thought would make it feel more organic or would make it feel a bit more grounded.
Well, let me ask you, just to get super specific. So I'm assuming when you're making your documentaries, obviously you're being opportunistic, but you have like a structure and you have a shot list.
Yes.
Right. How did you make a shot list for this movie?
Tim Orr, the DP, is really like credit to him, because what he had that I didn't have is he could honestly schedule in terms of the lighting setups and know actually how much time, because the big difference from what I've done before is actually not working with the actors and any of that. It's the amount of lighting. Weirdly, and so that's,
you're used to like 3 or 4 lights.
Oh yeah, absolutely, an available light, and
or like one interview setup that you're going to be at all day.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is my documentaries aren't kind of gritty, and they're actually like the last 3 things I did I shot on the Alexa anyway, so it's not like I'm making kind of run and gun like handheld stuff. I think the perception of like, oh, she's a documentary maker, it especially in the last few years of the things that have been kind of being made, and we've all seen that documentaries can be incredibly cinematic and have great production values and stuff. Oh yes, well now that's become ridiculously overused, and now property TV shows have got drone shots in the opening credits, haven't they?
Well, I think that's where drones come from, is real estate agents. But even American Vandal, you know, that Netflix show, which is like a mockumentary. There's like so many drone shots in the second season, and I couldn't tell if that was like part of the joke or not.
No, it's definitely,
I'm sure it is. Yeah,
the joke.
I'm sure it is, because the question of how you then, in a world where everything's 4K and you can get a drone really easily, what makes something cinematic is a fascinating question. But in terms of the sort of shot, the process of how we came to write this shot list, the thing that I felt I lacked more than anything, the thing that I was most worried about is it was just because you're lighting 8 women often in the same room. And
it's a big cast.
It's huge, like older.
And they're not 15 years old.
They're all different skin tones. Everybody's older. And we want it to feel natural. I don't want it to feel.
They've all been on so many sets where they could literally be like,
the
hey,
one.
Don't put that light there.
Absolutely. And I want them to feel comfortable, but I also don't want it to feel like a kind of glossy, fake, heightened movie. So lighting 8 women in a dance scene where they're all wearing exercise gear. They're all over the age of 60 or 65. You've got people who have been on camera for their whole life. And you need to move through it quickly. And I don't want a situation where we have to have such strict marks that people can't move in the shot.
You just got to fix it all with visual effects.
Well, what's amazing is what Tim achieved and his team. I really think I'm so pleased with that aspect of it but when we were shortlisting, he would be like, okay, Zara, like we need, if you want to get that and that, that's a 50-minute changeover. I'd be like, 50 minutes? What do you, and he's like,
just move the camera, dude.
He's like, no,
like
realistically though,
light.
come on. Like, this is, to do this changeover, to flip from side to side, then that of course informs, well, how can we shoot this in a way that's efficient and keeps the values that we want? And that was a process, but he was really good at kind of we'd have an idea of what we wanted to do to cover, and the fact of the matter is, when you're working on such a crazy schedule, you do end up chasing getting through the work to have enough to edit, and that can be very depressing.
Changing lenses. Like, we got this on the 25, let's do it on an 85.
Yeah, or just like we need the reverse of that, and we've only got time to do shot and revert. Right. I mean, sometimes it was just so limited. It was,
and when you have 8 people.
Yeah. So I'm not pretending that I think that we had the freedom here to, and in the future I would, it would be amazing to be able to have more time to actually construct. But wherever we could, we tried to be as smart as we could to kind of get something that felt,
alive and
alive,
interesting.
Exactly. Because it would be in the time that we had, it would, the economics of it say shoot it like TV, basically.
Right.
That's the sad truth of the matter.
Sure.
Did you use a lot of Steadicam or dolly or cranes or anything?
We
like that?
didn't. We used Steadicam in a few places, especially for the dance, the finale, obviously. For the 2 big dance performances, we used cranes, but for the most part, this is the thing that I kind of. We would be discussing how we would do a certain scene, and it would be like, well, we could be like dolly through the women here, or we could be handheld, and I would often opt for the handheld option, which I just, when it works, I love the feel of it because you feel like there's a human being there, and I like that.
Yeah.
And I think there are a couple of scenes in the film that I feel are where it feels most alive, and they are the scenes where we had the 2 operators going around finding things with the finding
Sometimes
moments like lines and looks and things that you just there are some, and that's when it feels real to me.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any sort of relationship between handheld and comedy? Like, I guess a lot of times, some of the modern stuff like the Veep and Modern Family and stuff is very handheld, but I think traditionally, like, comedy has been shot very
because you have
static, wide.
Yeah, because there's a physicality to it, right? That's where you've got to choose your moments, because there's a physicality to some aspects of it where you just need to you need to see what they're doing, and actually you can be limiting it by being too in there and too intimate. But I think with Poms, because I was trying to achieve something that felt like it's kind of got a heart to it, and it's not being marketed in that way necessarily, but to me, the sort of, there is an emotional storyline within it that that if you watch the movie, hopefully comes out. And when in those moments that feel more intimate and more personal, that's when I kind of allowed us to go in there, because I agree with you. Like, there is a reason that studio comedies have been shot in the same way, and you just kind of, there's a certain extent to which you have to kind of capitulate to that and be like, okay, in the time and everything, this works.
Yeah, even if you go back to like Buster Keaton days and
absolutely.
stuff, which I only know about because of that
Video
every frame of painting. Yeah,
I think it's something about like the trickery of like what's going on, and no, you don't need the camera to be tricking you as well. Like, there's something about like, you just need to know that, like, okay, that you need to know where you are, and it just gives you a very safe place from which the performance can be the foreground.
Or there's this very mostly not true idea, but helpful on occasion, that if the people are moving, then you don't need to move the camera, and if the people aren't moving, then it's nice to move the camera. Like one or the other, but when you have both things moving, it's like an action scene, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. And it can become too much. Yeah, and I think also letting all of that stuff get in the way of like the performance would be a mistake, and I always felt that. And it's not to say that in the future I don't have aspirations to make films that are more, from a cinematography point of view, more kind of elaborate or whatever. But for this, I think you've got to know like what your value system is.
Exactly.
And with the thing that you're making, and for for me, it was like, these women, and looking at these women is my kind of front and center. That's what I want to happen here. And I actually think doing anything that's too elaborate and kind of and directors love to talk about like how they design shot sequences and stuff, and those kind of things take up a lot of airtime on kind of filmmakers talking about filmmaking. But I think in the end, it's like knowing what's your key asset here, like what are people going to be engaging with on a real level here, and trying to do everything you can to sort of help that and support that. That's why Tim was so interesting, because he, you don't win awards for like shooting commercial comedies.
Sure, yeah.
And yet it's a real art form, and he has done like, he did Z for Zachariah. So that's the movie you'd win an award for,
Right.
So it's
but bouncing back and forth.
Yeah,
is so
bouncing back. I
fascinating.
found that so interesting, about him. That's why I really loved him. I thought, this is a very unusual man.
I think shooting those really bright, colorful, saturated things is harder, personally. Like you see a DP shoot with one light, or like shooting something like Children of Men. I mean, it's beautiful and the camera design is like amazing, but from a lighting point of view, it's like, let's just backlight everything and let things play out in silhouette. And it's like, wow, that's amazing. But then when you're doing a comedy and they're like, hey, we really want to see everyone's faces and everyone should look good and soft, and we're going to move around here, and then they're going to fall down this off the roof of the house, and it all needs to be clear and visually engaging. And
but
all
also
that stuff.
don't draw too much attention to yourself.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's what's
hard.
Really hard. And that's why I kind of take my hat off in terms of the lighting, particularly, because I think that to light for those kind of scenes and do it in a way that doesn't feel garish and kind of just everything's just overlit.
It's not
to the
Disney.
Point. Yes.
But it's natural, but beautiful.
I think that is so hard to do as a skill.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you wish you could change? Like, looking back, like what advice would you give yourself starting the movie?
Interrogate the schedule more.
Yeah.
I really didn't, because of this narrative that was being fed to me about, this is your first narrative feature and we've got this. We know how to make movies in America with union crews, and you just need to kind of come on this ride with us. I slightly internalized that. And actually, if you're the person as the director who ultimately is the only consistent force from the beginning to the end, right? That's what I see is your job. And you can see if there's a slow car crash happening in front of you. I think you can kind of look at you can interpret the the schedule and you can look at where there are going to be real issues and problems and where people are putting their head in the sand, especially if you talk to the heads of departments who have done this many, many times and know. And I kind of feel like I could have had more shooting time within the schedule if I had been more proactive about questioning things earlier on. Things like how much location scouting time do you have? Where are the locations in relation to, basic stuff that really isn't actually your job, right?
Right.
But it is, because everything's your job in the end.
Right. Well, and you also, on a gut level, know the movie better than anyone else.
Right.
And so sometimes you can like speed things up or slow things down or whatever it takes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for example, like the first, when we were shooting the stuff in the dance scenes, I knew that what was in the script wasn't representative of what I wanted to be in the film. And because you can't write a dance scene, like, they rehearse a few moves. Literally, that's the scene in the script. Martha, Diane's character, teaches them this new move and they rehearse it. End of scene. Okay, so what is that? Is that half a day? Is that an hour? Are there going to be lines that will be improv?
Sure.
I'm assuming you choreographed everything ahead of time, right?
Well, we did. So we worked with a choreographer and there was a boot camp for the women and they all kind of got together and learnt the choreography. But what we did was we had to then, from knowing what the end dance was, I had to work with the choreographer to figure out what are they doing in all these dance scenes.
Right, so it adds up to...
Where it just says, they practice a few moves. Literally, that was a line in the script. So I tried to kind of make it clear to the ADs that, how I wanted to do things, but there's a kind of culture of if it is not literally in the script, it will not happen. And that's the biggest thing I learned was like next time before prep, I will literally go and write every look from every person to person in the script. Yeah. If I know that I want Cheryl to look at Martha across the table, I will add in as many of those things as possible because if it's in the script, they can't not schedule for it.
Right.
Yeah.
But if it's not in the script, you just got a fight on your hands.
Yeah. They're like, it's a sixth of a page. What's the
yes,
deal?
Yes, it's a sixth of a page. This is nothing yet, but this is the heart of this film,
Yeah.
In this case, it's a dance movie. So, and we got there in the end and it's not like, but I think I could have saved myself a lot of arguments and kind of, if I'd kind of known more in advance about that. And I kind of have got it in my head now for anything that I would write that would be getting close to production. I would go through the script with a fine-tooth comb and literally put in every cutaway, every establishing shot, everything.
Yeah. Something that is like super annoying is when you're like exhausted and you have to shoot the next day and then the AD shows you a call sheet and they're like, can you just look at this and make sure it looks okay? And the instinct is always like, yeah, it looks fine, Yeah, but like really, if you stop and you look at it,
you have to. And it's like because it's such. I mean, I have such respect for ADs because how the hell do they do that?
Right.
Like,
they've been on for a week
like
and they need to know everything you've known for 4 years.
Yeah, but at the same time, like there are things that you just get lost in translation because they haven't known it. It's like, whoa, I didn't think we needed that character. That's another example. A character who wasn't actually explicitly written into the scene, but there was an assumption that, of course, they'd be there because they're part of that group,
Right.
And then they weren't on the call sheet for that day.
Yeah.
And of course, you hope that you'd go through all this stuff in prep and that, and again, we did and we got through it all, but I think I could have saved a lot of time in prep by having done that work myself.
Just hear the notes, decode it. Yeah, so smart.
Well, so how can people see Poms?
Well, if you're in the US, you can see Poms. It is being widely released on the 10th of May across the US.
Movie theaters.
In movie theaters, yes. It's on wide release. They're going for the mums and daughter audience for Mother's Day.
Awesome.
That's the kind of take your mum to see Poms.
Mother's Day is May 10th.
Actually, Sunday, May the 12th, and they're releasing it on the Friday. So the hope is that, if anyone's taking their mum or their grandmother to the cinema on that weekend, they're going to see
the new
Poms.
DK movie. Yeah,
exactly. So that's the hope. But I honestly I kept saying this to them. I've seen in test screenings that we've done, the response of young men is really interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I kind of really hope that some of those people find their way to the theatre to see it. It's clearly not the target audience. Like,
but men can take their mom. Yeah.
Well, there's the thing. And I think that in the test screenings, what I saw with these guys in their 30s who got quite emotional, I think they're thinking about their mothers.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful. But yeah, the big push is moms and daughters.
Shall we endorse real quick?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Unpaid endorsements.
Unpaid endorsements.
So my endorsement, I'll kick it off. There's a short called Ad Man that's making the rounds right now. That's a rom-com as told by how would I describe
It's
it?
like a series of like 10 to 12
Commercials, yeah. So like basically this couple goes through this relationship. They have their meet cute. They like fall in love, all the stuff. But it's all as though it's formatted as a series of commercials about this couple. So it's really clever. It's really...
One person wrote and directed it, but they look like commercials, and they're kind of across the board, like a variety of commercials.
Yeah. So you just you get these little slices of life of this couple's relationship evolving, but with a tag here or there for whatever product.
Like it's a commercial for a moving company when they're moving houses, and it's a commercial for a phone company when like his mom is checking in on his relationship.
But it's not actually a commercial.
Not
it's just
actual
formatted as
Correct.
if it is.
Yeah,
oh,
correct.
interesting.
It's really well done, and like all the casting, it's like the most working commercial actors in America. Like everyone, if you watch commercials,
I bought Oreos because of that guy one time.
Wow.
Super fun.
Very interesting. Ad Man.
Yeah. That'll be in the show notes.
Cool. You got anything?
I have actually. But I can endorse it in the sense of like I've only known it for a few days, but I'm into it. So I've just moved house and I'm going to be spending a lot more time in the car in LA, even more time than you normally spend, which is a lot of your life. And so podcasts are like a huge part of my life.
Yeah, sure.
And my friend told me about this app called Autumn. Do you know this?
No. AUTM?
No, AUDM, like Autumn, like Audible.
Okay.
And it's basically this partnership with like the New Yorker and the Atlantic and stuff, and magazines for long form content, where they get actors. It's not like a robot voice, because there are some that transcribe it with a robot voice, which is impossible to listen to, I find. But this is like actual kind of voiceover actors reading the long form articles.
So
and
awesome.
It's such a good idea. And so like if you're in the car, you can like listen to an Atlantic article.
That's so
and
awesome.
If you look at the app as well, you can also read along if you want to.
Wow.
But my thing was when I'm always doing either driving or I enjoy listening whilst I'm doing, and I just think it's an amazing idea. And it's like I'm doing a free trial at the moment, but it's like $7 a month to subscribe. Which,
Will it read like my Instagram feed for me while I'm driving?
Possibly.
It's like picture of avocado toast.
Cute baby.
But I just think, because all those long articles that you kind of want to read, but realistically, in modern life. But no, and
Is
it's
it like
so
a
far
robot
so
voice?
good. No, it's not a
Oh,
robot
it's a real
voice. This
person.
is the key thing. This is why I like it, because I've tried those ones before where it's audio transcription, but it's basically just like a computer generated voice, which is horrible to listen to.
Right. No offense, Siri or Alexa.
This is a real human being who's a good reader, and it's really engaging. So that's my unpaid endorsement.
Perfect. Autumn. Love it.
That's cool.
Oren, what you got, buddy?
I got a quick unendorsement, which is if you don't sit in the back row if you watch a movie at the Cinerama Dome at the ArcLight. It's like I watched Endgame there. It's like over 3 hours, and it's like the most claustrophobic feeling I've ever had. I'd rather be on like a Cessna airplane, like flying for 100 hours. My other thing, I think this is a re-endorsement, but I'm just going to re-endorse it because Game of Thrones was on last night, episode 3, Battle of Winterfell. It was insanely dark. Like, my wife and I could not see
People are
anything.
mad about it. Yeah.
On the
internet
TV.
is
And we
upset
have...
about it.
It's not an amazing TV, but it's like a decent Samsung TV. And I was pausing it every 10 seconds, like playing with the brightness, the contrast, the background, and we just could not. It was an 82-minute battle in the middle of the night, and we just couldn't see anything. And I think the mistake we made is that we watched it like through the HBO Go app on my TV, where we should have watched it on the HBO Go app on the Apple TV. So this is a re-endorsement of the Apple TV, which everything on it, like Netflix, anything you watch on your Apple TV,
The compression is good.
it looks way better than if you watch it in your smart TV or your Roku or Fire Stick or anything. Apple TV just looks better, and something I kind of didn't care about, but ever since last night, I care about it because it was like, I mean, you know, it's like the best, our favorite show ever, and it's like there's only 3 episodes left, and now one of them we couldn't see anything. So annoying. Anyway.
That's a good tip. I didn't know anything about Apple, but
I only know it because someone on our podcast told us about it. Anyway. Well, Zara, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, guys.
You're a wealth of knowledge. We wish we could talk to you about Bangladesh and Rwanda and, you know,
well, now
Rhea
that you live
Perlman.
here, we'll have to have you come back on the show.
Yeah, I'll come back.
I do have a lot of Rhea Perlman questions, but we'll get to that after the episode. For listeners who want to check out the movie, what's the best way to find Poms?
I think go to pomsmovie.com or follow the hashtag PomsMovie, and there's all kinds of stuff going on Instagram.
And what about you? Are you on Twitter or do you have a website?
I'm on Twitter at Zara, Zar Hayes, and my Instagram is the same.
And have you ever considered at Hayes Zara? I think it would be pretty good.
Someone's already taken it, and it costs thousands of dollars to buy it.
Well, you should pay them. Well, cool. Well, if you want to find out more about the show,
all the things we talked about,
go to justshootitpod.com. You can email us, justshootitpod@gmail.com, and we are on all the things. But I guess Facebook and Instagram are probably your best bet, and Twitter at justshootitpod. I'm on Twitter at SmiteyPyleg, and I'm on Instagram at OKaplan.
I'm at Mr. Matt Enlow on all social media. This episode was edited by Jay McCullough, produced by Madeline Rosewatt, and our webmaster is Ewan Williams.
Give us an iTunes review.
And the music you're listening to right now is by the artist Jahzzar and provided by the Free Music Archive. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.